In today's video, I'm going to be discussing draining covert narcissism in relationships. Let's get started. Tamie M. Joyce here, empowerment life coach, creator of the Freedom class and the Ascension class. And if you're new to my channel, welcome. So happy to have you here. Please take a moment to say hello and introduce yourself in the comment section below. And if you're back, welcome back. Thanks for tuning in. Either way, be sure to subscribe and hit that bell to be notified when I post new videos throughout the week. So let's talk about draining covert narcissism in relationships. First of all, the reason relationships with these people is so completely and utterly draining is because when we're talking about covert narcissists, we're talking about people who are fundamentally emotional toddlers in addition to being highly toxic. They calibrate at a very low frequency on the consciousness scale. And no matter how old they are, they show up in relationships as childish, manipulative liars who are completely identified with being the victim, no matter how appallingly they themselves have behaved. In fact, if you observe them long enough, you'll notice they actually enjoy playing the victim role in life. Sick as that is, it's true. This becomes obvious because over time, you'll notice they do little to nothing to affect any real change in their lives. Sure, they'll pay lip service to doing the work if they think you're watching, or if they think it's going to get them some attention or applause. But at the end of the day, they actually never get down to doing anything to help themselves or change their circumstances. Why? Because they like being the helpless little victim. So why change? It serves them in a very sick and unhealthy way, for sure, but on some level, it serves them, or they wouldn't keep doing it decade after decade after decade. In addition, there's an energetic component to relationships that most people often overlook. When we are engaged in any way, in conversation, any sort of dynamic communication with a reasonably, relatively healthy individual, typically what happens is both people walk away feeling, at the very least, just as good as they did when they arrived, right? At the very least. If not, lit up, lighter from the inside out, better, enhanced. In other words, both people leave the exchange feeling good. Not so with a covert narcissist. These people are literally the epitome of energy vampire, which is why when you are engaged in any sort of conversation with him, you find yourself feeling completely exhausted. On a subconscious energetic level, they actually have the ability to plug into you, in particular if you are a sensitive, a highly empathic individual. They literally plug into you and siphon your vital life force energy from you. And this goes to the next level, of course, with all of the manipulation that tends to go on with these people, the emotional and psychological manipulation, guilt tripping, passive aggressive behavior, right? So they're literally siphoning your vital life force energy from you, which is why you need to have a nap after exposing yourself to this type of individual. And sometimes even you'll find you leave with a hangover that takes you literally 3 days to recover from, if not longer. You'll also notice that they have a very fragile sense of self. Unlike their more overt, grandiose cousins on the spectrum of destructive narcissism, in other words, your classic overt narcissist, the covert narcissist typically will lack the natural, what is often quite attractive charisma and charm that the overt narcissist has, right? So the covert narcissist won't present with that type of charisma and charm. They don't lead with that. They don't present with that, certainly. They tend to be, as I've said in many other videos, more meek, demure, shy, reserved, self-effacing, which is why they can be so tricky to spot. But just like their more overt cousins on the spectrum, covert narcissists lack the ability to feel the consequences of their behavior, their shitty behavior and actions, their relationship crimes, the consequences on other people. So whether we're talking about overt or covert narcissists, both lack the capacity to understand the effects, the consequences of their attitudes and behavior on you, right? So they lack that empathy. They'll be empathy impaired at the very least, if not completely devoid in conscience. And if you find yourself feeling duped because they appear to be empathetic sometimes, or they appear to have the capacity to sort of half-ass apologize, or maybe take a smidgen of accountability or responsibility if they're backed into a corner and have no choice. Make no mistake, do not be fooled. You are being manipulated. That is not actual empathy and remorse. A sincere apology is not just words when I'm left with no alternative because there's such a bright light being shone on my asinine behavior. A sincere apology is backed up by amended behavior. And this is how you know you are being manipulated, because again, they'll pay lip service if they think you're watching, or they're backed into a corner, or it'll get them the right applause or attention. They'll say whatever it takes, but it's pure manipulation. It is not a sincere apology. A sincere apology, again, is backed up by a living amended behavior, a change that lasts in attitude and behavior. And you'll notice that's not what happens with these folks, right? So while you're going round and round and round and round in the circular conversations, in all of the toxicity, in all of the manipulation, in all of the blame shifting and the dodging and the pretending and the lying and the deceiving, because they'll say whatever it takes, right? They're working real hard to get everybody to buy into their victim story and feel sorry for them. So while you're being spun through this very toxic, low vibrational vortex, you are fully having the vital life force energy drained from your very being. No fun, no fun, which is why close proximity to someone who lands on the spectrum of covert narcissism over the long term is a great way to get sick. True story. That will be the price that you will pay, whether this is in a marriage, a living situation, a work environment, family that you continue to expose yourself to out of a sense of duty and obligation, while allowing yourself to be thrown under the bus and completely scapegoated in the process. Long-term exposure to someone who lands on the spectrum of covert narcissism is not just going to annihilate your sense of self, your sense of self-worth, and your self-esteem. It will take a physical toll on you if it has not already. It is a very, very stressful relationship to hang in there with, right? We stick it out in the hopes that we can love them enough, we can change ourselves enough, we can yell and scream and stomp and do our own manipulating enough to affect change in them, right? So we're hanging in there, right? Meanwhile, we're getting sicker and sicker by the year. So something to consider. There is a very heavy price to remain in that type of dynamic. If you are in close proximity to a covert narcissist over the long term, you're gonna pay on many levels. Now, comment below and let me know whether or not you're struggling with someone you suspect lands on the spectrum of destructive covert narcissism. Someone who is likely on the regular siphoning the life force from your very being, from your soul. And if so, what are you going to do about it? That's the big question, right? Now, with that said, if you would like to learn more about the possibility of working with me in my 8-week transformational coaching program, the Freedom Class, be sure to check out the links in the description below where you can apply to see if you qualify for a free one-on-one consultation with either myself or a member of my team. Now, another reason why folks who land on the spectrum of destructive covert narcissism are so fully draining to be exposed to on the regular, to be in any kind of relationship with, is their propensity for deception. They are willing to lie outright or by omission, to distort, to use truth out of context, to say whatever it takes to manipulate the perceptions of others, right? They will say anything as long as it serves the purpose of shedding them, making them look like, the hero or the victim. So casting them in a particular light, or more often than not, saving their own ass, right? So it's all about perception manipulation, and they really have no boundaries. They have no ability looking an individual in the eyes, leaving great big huge chunks of the truth out of the story in order to manipulate the perception of the individual who they want to appear a certain way in front of, right? So they'll do and say whatever it takes to save their own ass, casting you as the villain time and time and time again. And, unfortunately, what goes on with this is all of the focus is put on how you behaved, how you let them down, how you betrayed them, how hard done by and victimized they are or have been by you. And I can tell you some next level crazy stories about this, but nonetheless, like I'll stick to the point. All of the focus is on what you did wrong, how you reacted, how you overreacted, while completely bypassing and totally ignoring everything that they've done for years, if not decades, to inspire, to provoke, and to trigger the reaction. Doesn't matter what they did. Poke, 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 abandon, neglect, bully, lie to, manipulate, drive you out of your ever-loving mind crazy. And when you finally have enough and have a legitimate, quite rational response, intense emotional reaction and response to the crazy that's coming at you, you're the bad guy. That would drain the life force out of just about anybody if they had to be on the receiving end of that kind of crazy on the regular, right? In addition, these are the people who are really good at sucking all the air out of any room, especially if they're not getting the attention they crave or they're not getting their way. They are masters of the sulk and other passive aggressive ways of communicating, like sighing and the silent treatment and one word responses uttered just barely over a whisper. Poor thing. Remember, you're dealing with an emotional toddler. When you're in a relationship with someone who lands on the spectrum of destructive covert narcissism, you're also going to be dealing with someone who rages when they don't get their own way, or especially when they realize they cannot succeed in manipulating you. Fun stuff, right? So this relationship, you'll find, will be defined by 4 things, and they are entitlement, exploitation, manipulation, and empathy impairment. Sound familiar? And lastly, one of the main reasons why any type of relationship with an individual who lands on the spectrum of destructive covert narcissism can be so completely draining is you'll notice a lot of compulsivity to their personality, right? They're very obsessive compulsive. The more high spectrum they are, the more you're going to notice that that is the case. They will be obsessive about cleaning, about diet and exercise. How they look is a big, big deal. Now, don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with taking pride in the way that you look. But with these folks, it's next level obsessive. They'll also often have issues with gambling, shopping, spending, eating, whether that's food addictions or eating disorders, right? Sometimes even substance abuse issues, right? Not always, but sometimes. But the point being, there is an obsessive compulsive personality going on with this person one way or another. They are anxiety riddled, even though that may not be obvious by virtue of how they present. Internally, the closer you get, the more obvious that'll be. And they've got to deal with all of that fear and anxiety that they're carrying around and running from and projecting, quite frankly, in their lives, right? So you're going to notice a lot of obsessive compulsive stuff going on with this type of individual. And the closer proximity you are to someone with those kinds of issues, the more your vital life force energy is really, drained from your very being, as I've said a number of times now in this video. What makes all of this worse is they'll start projecting all of that onto you. So that'll be a big clue for you. When they start accusing you of doing and being all the things that they do and be on the regular, and actually have like no part of your makeup, like there's no part of you that is any of those things, but they're accusing you of doing and being all of those things, that's a big red flag. And again, for those of us who are highly sensitive, highly empathic, and then you add to the mix untreated codependence, untreated folks with adult child syndrome, whether that is adult child of alcoholism, adult child of any kind of high spectrum dysfunction, neglect, abuse, abandonment, right? When we have that kind of untreated adult child syndrome going on and or untreated codependency, and we are highly empathic and we are lacking boundaries, man, can a covert narcissist really latch on to an individual like that I've just described, who I was historically pre-recovery a long time ago. A covert narcissist can latch on to an individual like that and really, that vampiric part of their makeup, right? It's like the demonic sucking the luge, the vital life force energy from your very being. And we wonder why we are depressed, anxiety riddled ourselves, confused, highly emotional, highly reactive, struggling with our own substance abuse issues just to freaking cope, right? We wonder why we're having such a hard time trying to get through the day, life in general, while other people seem to be able to thrive, why our lives are so unmanageable while other people seem to, have quite manageable functional lives and relationships. When you've got this kind of low vibrational entity in the way of a covert narcissist latched onto you in any way, draining your vital life force energy from you over the long term, like I said, you're going to get sick. Probably on more than one level. There's a huge price to pay. And it is very, very hard to live your best life as your best self while all of that's going on. And with that, my friends, I'm going to call it a wrap. I hope you got some value out of this today. If you liked what you heard, be sure to give me a like and drop a comment and let me know what your biggest takeaway was. If you're new to my channel, once again, great big huge welcome. Thank you for showing up. So happy to have you here. If you are back, thanks for coming back. And either way, be sure to subscribe and hit that bell to be notified when I post new videos throughout the week. And as I mentioned, if you are interested in learning more about working with me, the possibility of working with me in my 8-week transformational coaching program, the Freedom Class, there are links in the description below. You can click on the link to go to my website to check out all the details. As well, there is a link in the description below to book a free one-on-one consultation with us, to apply to see if you qualify for a one-on-one consultation with either myself or a member of my amazing team. And as always, I will leave you with this. Know your value. Know your value and unlock your freedom. Much love. Catch you in the next video. Bye for now.